A very warm good morning to one and all present over here class. Welcome to the digital platform of APS. Now this is Pawan Kumar. Today I will start first lecture of chapter 14 probability. So class, in previous lecture I have completed three-dimensional geometry. So in today lecture I will start with a new chapter probability. So let us start with the new topics probability. So what is probability? See, now class, first definition is probability. What is probability? So see the definition. The literal meaning of chances of occurrence of event. The literal meaning of chances of occurrence of event is known as probability, or in other words we can say it is a number lying between 0 to 1. Means we can say probability is the number lying between 0 to 1. Probability is the number lying between 0 to 1. See, or in other words we can write it is a branch of mathematics. It is a branch of mathematics. It is a branch of mathematics in which the chances of occurrence of event is chances of occurrence of event happening. Chances of occurrence of event happening. Happening by a or assigned. We can say happening is assigned. Assigned by a numerical value. Assigned by a numerical value. And numerical value is lying between from 0 to 1. That predicts how the likely events to be occur. Now this is the definition of probability. This is the definition of probability. See, now I will come to the next definition. The next definition is random experiment. Random experiment. See, new heading is random experiment. Second heading is random experiment. Now see the definition. those experiment which when repeated under the some identical conditions, under the identical condition, those experiment which when repeated under the identical condition do not produce the, we can say, same result, or same result, in other words we can write outcomes is known as random experiment. Is known as random experiment. Or in other words we can write the definition of random experiment: an experiment those outcomes cannot be predicted or determined in advance. Means we can write an experiment those outcomes cannot be predicted or determined in advance is known as random experiment. In other words we can write also, or we can say, random experiment are those experiment whose outcomes are not defined. We can say whose outcomes are not determined, which outcomes will come. So random experiment are those experiment when repeated under the identical condition do not produce the same result or outcomes is known as random experiment. In other words, an experiment those outcomes cannot be predicted or determined in advance is said to be random experiment. Now I will come to the next definition. The next definition is outcomes. See, now next heading is outcomes. See, or experiment. So now see the definition of experiment. New heading is experiment. What is experiment? An operation which can produce An operation which can produce some well-defined outcomes. We can say some well-defined outcomes means an operation which can produce some well-defined outcomes is known as experiment. Is known as experiment. This is the definition of experiment. Now there are two types of experiment, you know. Note point. There are two types of experiment. One is deterministic experiment. Deterministic experiment. Second is probabilistic experiment. Probabilistic experiment, and this experiment is also known as random experiment. This experiment is also known as random experiments. See, this is the definition of experiment and the types of experiment. Now I will come to the next topic. The next topic is sample space. Next topic is sample space. So what is sample space? See, what is sample space? Heading is sample space. What is sample space? The set of all possible outcomes in any random experiment is known as sample space. The set of all possible outcomes in any random experiment is known as sample space. It is denoted by capital letter S of English alphabets. Capital letter S of English alphabets. And defined by for n possible outcomes of event that is S is equal to E1 comma E2 comma E3 comma E4 up to En. And E1, E2, E3, this is elementary event. Elementary event, and this S is known as sample space. This S is known as sample space. See, this is the definition of sample space. Now I will come to the next definition. The next definition is event. The next definition is event. So what is event? See, next heading is event. What is event? A subset of sample space associate with a random or associate with a random experiment is known as event. Now, event is denoted by capital E. Means we can say every elementary event is an event. It is denoted by capital letter E of English alphabets. So note point is here. Note point. You have seen every elementary event is an event. Every elementary event, this is denoted by E1, E2, E3 up to En, is an event, but its converse is not true. But its converse is not true. Its converse is not true. And many events is denoted by E1, E2, E3 up to En. This is the definition of event. Now I will come to the next definition, simple event. Next definition is simple event. See. Now next heading is simple event. What is simple event? It is a type of event which contain a single sample point, or in other words we can write an event containing only a single sample point. An event containing only a single sample point is known as simple event. Simple event. Note point. It is also known as elementary event. Elementary event. For example, E1, E2, E3, E4 up to En are simple event or elementary event. Simple event or elementary event. See, definition of simple event or elementary event is completed. Now I will come to the next definition. The next definition is compound event. See, the next definition is compound event. Compound event. Next heading is compound event. So what is compound event? See, events which are not elementary. Events which are not elementary is known as compound event. Events which are not elementary is known as compound events, or in other words we can write events which contain more than one elements is known as compound or composite events, or in other words event which contain more than one elements. more than one elements is known as compound event. This is the definition of compound events, and this type of event is also known as composite events. Note point. It is also known as composite event. It is also known as composite event. See, this definition of this is the definition of compound events is completed. Now see,